So, welcome everybody to Professional and Personal Success During Uncertain Times. So, today is our first day of International Week as part of our Global Trade Conference. And a big thank you to our lovely headline sponsors, Dyke, Yaxley. So, we've got Christy and Rob on the call today, and they are also being joined by Hanna and Alison. So, a few more events that we've got taking place this week. There's still plenty of time to book on, so please do. We've also got an event app as well, so you can connect with delegates on there as well, so it's a great way of networking. Yes, as I mentioned, we've got Rob today and Christy, and then from Dyke Yaxley, and then we've got Alison, Director of Transformational Mind Coach, and Hanna, who is owner of Mental Nourish based in the US. So they're just going to be talking around some key points and insights of the challenges they saw throughout the pandemic, and give you all some key takeaways. So with that, I'll hand over to Christy.
Great, thank you very much, Grace. Thank you everyone for joining. One of the things we'd like to start with to just get everyone thinking is this last year or so has been, you can use many words to describe how it's affected each one of us, whether it's personally, professionally, our teams. So what we'd like you to do, either now or throughout the presentation, is use the chat. And if you wouldn't mind dropping in one word that you would use to describe how the past year has felt, either, especially professionally and with your teams. We're not going to share this with anyone. This will be anonymous. Grace and I will see see your comments, but we won't be sharing them amongst the group. So it'll be a private thing, but we just like to get some feedback and some thoughts. So we are now also going to start interactively with a couple of poll questions. So we're going to start with the first poll question. If Grace can bring that up for us. So many on this call have a leadership role within your organization. So as a leader, would you know what to look out for signs of burnout? We're going to make this about a 30-second question. Great, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. So some do, or have a comprehensive, some are doing some things, and some don't have some things in place, which is very common. And hopefully today we'll get some takeaways about how we as leaders can work with our team members in situations, because the next question is, or one of the things we will discuss is, what is the new normal? What are we looking at? So I would like to introduce our panelists, Alison and Hanna. They work with clients, business clients and individual clients, but work both in personal and professional settings. So to start our conversation, Alison and Hanna, during the past year, what would you describe as has been the biggest challenges for teams and team members?
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see everyone on the screen. I think for me, seeing clients kind of wrestle with boundaries, both personally and professionally, has been a huge red flag. So first, kind of establishing what those boundaries even are in the workplace and at home, how you communicate them with your team, with your family, and then how you build your schedule to work with your individual boundaries, which look different from one person to the next. So that has been sort of the most staggering thing for me, is in this time that's changing, what can you communicate as being your kind of hard line for, don't call me past 7 p.m. or I'm going to a yoga class at lunch, and being able to feel confident in those decisions and then having the tools and resources to communicate them. I think also from a leader perspective, from leaders, knowing how to understand that those boundaries look different for each of your employees, and how to provide a space to really accommodate to them while also being able to get work done, have a productive environment as well. So Alison, I'll turn to you and see what you've seen in the UK.
Cool, thanks, Hannah. Obviously seeing similar in terms of boundaries, but I think one of the things that I've noticed the most is because we're social beings, humans, and also the human mind is a certainty making machine. This current situation has caused a lot of differences for us to manage. When we haven't got clarity on situations, that causes the human brain to feel very concerned. When we've lost our autonomy, you know, a lot of people who are just told, right, go home, work from home, adapt your house to create that situation, it's caused all sorts of problems. We also know that it has created some good times for some people, and some people have definitely seen new opportunities. But I think something else that I've seen a lot of is people not then able to chat with their colleagues, create and simulate, I call it, simulate a normal working environment. So those chats that you have at the coffee machine, the photocopier, they've gone, and people then had to try and work out how they were going to do that. And I think because a lot of those conversations went, often they're the gems, aren't they? They're the ones that people really get things done with. We then feel very isolated. And I think something else that I'm seeing a lot of is that people then assume that they're on their own. No one else is feeling like me. I feel vulnerable. I don't want to say I'm struggling. Some people obviously will be the opposite to that and will be letting everyone know that they're struggling. But I think just feeling like I can't really speak up because I'm the only one. And again, the human brain takes things very, very personally. So it will think that you're the only one who's struggling. And I think I'm seeing a lot of that, people not being able to just speak up, and that falseness of I've got to make a call, I've got to arrange a Zoom to have a little chat. And I think what I'm seeing is people aren't doing that, or certainly weren't doing that at the beginning. Maybe they got better into it now. You got any more thoughts, Hannah?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you made about, lack of clarity, kind of feeling lost, because surprisingly, that's actually one of the leading factors that lead to employee burnout. So in the workplace, you think of things that lead to burnout as, intense workload or unreasonable time pressure, things like that. But actually lack of clarity around your purpose in your role, the workplace mission can lead employees to feel checked out, to feel lost, and that can permeate into your personal life as well. So I think that was a great point about how feelings of feeling lost or just feeling maybe perhaps confused or alone can lead to so many different things and in so many different areas as well.
Yeah.
I just, if you don't mind, we've been getting some nice comments here into the chat about this one word that describes how people have felt. And it's interesting because it's a little bit, there's positives, and then there's also, and I will admit, feeling many of the negatives. So we've got the word intense, we've got transformative, which I think is very interesting, lonely at times, tenuous, difficult, intimidating, challenging a couple times. I love this answer, creative, because we had to become creative, like Alison said, suddenly make our home space into a workspace. This is a great answer, adapting. And then, as some of us, I will also be able to admit, it felt non-productive, at times. So just thought I would share those things. And also with the audience, we're going to have a Q&A towards the end. So if you have questions, as Hannah and Alison and Rob are speaking, please drop them into the chat and we'll be happy to address them towards the end. But just wanted to share some of those thoughts with you.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think there is a range. I think for all of us, we've probably all got some positives out of this current year, but obviously there's a lot of challenges, and that is part of I suppose our move forward, is that we do respect each other's differences, and we'll come to that in a bit. But I just also wanted to share some ideas around how for a lot of leaders, if you are leaders or managing people, I'm hearing a lot of leaders who have really struggled with the responsibility of keeping everybody doing okay. And that's massive. I mean, it's a big responsibility anyway, managing staff and managing teams, but actually the responsibility of making sure that everyone is okay. But the challenge came from, how am I going to be okay? And I think being able to manage all of us individually is hard enough. And then being able to stretch to manage other people, bearing in mind everyone's different and everyone will have had a different experience, as is demonstrative by the different words that you've all put on for our one word today. So I think that feeling alone when you're not sure how to manage yourself, emotionally manage yourself, and then be able to reach out for others, I think has been quite tiring for a lot of people. Holding the fort together when everyone else is spread out, I think, is something else that has been really difficult for teams and businesses. Have you got something else, Hannah?
Alison, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you bring up a good point. I was going to mention is, as a leader of a group or a manager of a group, obviously your primary concern most probably is the people you're managing and your employees, your staff, your colleagues. And like I said, I think sometimes, one, you maybe forget about taking care of yourself, but two, I think you actually potentially don't realize that how subtly how you're feeling actually permeates through how you're delivering stuff, even when you think you're putting up a good show. How have you got some sort of thoughts or ideas or suggestions to people how they could manage themselves a little bit better, or what they should be looking at, or what maybe some of the signs are that you think, no, I'm doing really well, in actual fact you're not doing really well?
Yeah, I think that the big thing that I always say for any answer or any question, I should say, like that, is bringing yourself into your own awareness. So noticing that if you are feeling a bit ratty or a bit irritated, and just be with that for now, rather than then just jump into responding to something. You know, we all know that if you can just take a moment before you send a response to something, you'll probably engage with a better, more rational part of the mind. But I think something that I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm sure Hannah is as well, is about trust. I think we had to really challenge ourselves around trusting self to be okay, trusting self to be able to continue to run a business or manage a business, and then trusting our staff, trusting each other that we will be okay. And there's great pockets of people really pulling together and working really well, but I'm also seeing some real pockets where it's the complete opposite. And I think your question, Rob, we're kind of going to come to that a bit more as we go into the call, because the second we want to really think about some strategies for you. But I'm sure Hannah's got something that's useful.
Yeah, I think that awareness that you were talking about is extremely important. That's the first step in recognizing any signs of burnout. But there are some sort of more practical signs that you can look out for that sort of sneak up on you. And the more that you can recognize them, as Alison was saying, within yourself, the more you can perhaps recognize them with employees and start to have more honest and open conversations. And some of those sneaky signs that you might not expect are things like, poor sleep, new physical symptoms. Sometimes it shows up in the stomach. Sometimes it shows up as tension headaches. Things like poor hygiene. Unfortunately, if you feel, lacking a shower every now and then, is no judgment there. But if you notice that it is happening often, or you're, forgetting to brush your hair often, these are just certain signs that show that you're not really, you don't have the energy resources, you feel too depleted to take care of yourself. And that can be a really hard thing to look at, because it's painful to see that you are struggling. But that awareness is the first step. And then just understanding, hey, I feel alienated from this conversation, or I feel like I don't want to go out, like I don't want to see anyone, which is tough right now, but feeling like you don't want to have that connection with people. These are just some of the signs of burnout, and we can get into that a little bit later and provide some resources, but just understanding that within yourself, noting them, and then realizing that, hey, perhaps maybe my employees are feeling this way too. Some practical ways to kind of get that conversation started.
Yeah. I think something else that's quite important is to keep an eye on the balance that we need to create with micromanaging, because you're getting anxious that you're not hearing enough, you don't know what's going on, your teams are dispersed, and actually wanting to be informed. But the balance then is the opposite. Is I'm also seeing is where people don't know how to deal with things, so they're not. And there's quite a bit of that going on. So almost that 1 minute you might be feeling like you need to home in on all your teams and you're ringing them up every 5 minutes, versus then in the middle, that would be ideal. But then often what I'm seeing is people are just, everything becomes in the too difficult category, or some of the things become in the too difficult category, so they're not being dealt with. And that, I think that leaves that very relatable part of how humans function left quite high and dry. Yeah.
I was going to say something that's interesting as well, most probably for certain people on the call here, because I know some of the names, and we've got employees like ourselves in both the UK and the US. And I think one of the challenges that we find as a business is it's challenging enough when you're dealing with one culture and you're in one situation and in one place and maybe in a fairly local area, to where you've got employees that are dotted around a country, gets a bit more complicated. And then when you've got employees dotted in maybe 1, 2, 3 countries, when you've been dealing with clients, Alison, Hannah, when you've maybe had clients with that diversity, what are you seeing going on there, and how do you sort of try and bring people with just culturally different backgrounds together to stay engaged on a team?
I think the answer that again feels very simple and yet often missed is ask. It's probably one of the most simplest things that we can do, and yet we often don't ask enough questions. I think something that I was going to come to later was that real recognition of differences. We're not all thinking the same. We're not all feeling the same about things. And, often when leaders and individuals hear that, it's like, oh yeah, because we do assume that everybody is thinking the same as us and everyone is going to have the same reaction to us. Particularly when we are busy and stressed, we forget that. And I think across cultures, across just teams, individuals, asking is something that's so important, so that you can get a sense of where they're at. Even down to an instruction. Has somebody actually understood what you've just asked them to do? And often they'll go away, especially team members will go away saying, yeah, I've got that, no problem. And actually they haven't got it at all. It hasn't fitted with their learning style. They haven't understood. And they will then be in, especially at the moment, if they're working from home, they'll probably be in quite a lot of drama, be feeling very emotional. I can't go back and ask it again. And yet, that is obviously the most obvious thing to do. So for me, it's about setting up opportunities for people to be able to ask enough questions to get to know what's working for them and what's not working for them.
That's really interesting, Alison. And from when we spoke as a group preparing for this, Hannah, I hope I'm not jumping in too much, but I was thinking of what you said about learning that term languishing. Mm. And if you have any insights on that, because as you say, Alison, as managers, leaders, team leaders, whatever our role is, we're working with the people that we work with remotely. They have different learning styles. That was a nice point, Alison. And we were all found ourselves in a very different position. And I keep thinking back to what you talked about, this term of languishing, Hannah. Would you mind adding that into your comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Languishing, I don't know if any of you have heard this term. It's a term that I recently heard of through, I think it was a New York Times article, which I can actually send in the follow-up materials. But it's this sort of weird cousin of burnout, where you're not necessarily expressing kind of those more severe symptoms of burnout, but you're just kind of feeling meh. You're feeling like not, a little bit of apathy, you're showing up for work, but you're not super motivated to do so. You're not quite at the point where you feel like checking out, which is what burnout starts to happen. But it's kind of a lack of caring. And again, that can be used as one of those initial red flags that lead to burnout eventually. Is what don't I care about that I used to? Is it perhaps a hobby? Is it perhaps, a work assignment that used to get me really excited? Things like that. But I also wanted to get back to Rob's question about this interesting international, how you kind of understand what's going on, how you unite teams who are scattered geographically. And I had a client who was a company in Canada, and I got on the call and I realized that I didn't even know what was going on in Canada. This was back in April. And I thought, maybe if I kind of just took 3 minutes, type in Nova Scotia, where the client was, what is happening there, just doing kind of that extra time that takes a few minutes to think through, I know I have an employee in Georgia or in London, and I kind of just want to get a feel of what they're going through. Taking that time to see what's going on there, so you have some points to introduce while you're talking to that employee, in terms of how you can communicate as a manager, but how you can communicate as a team. I found is that employees are kind of craving those connections that don't necessarily have to do with work. So something really easy and practical you can do at the beginning of these Zoom meetings for companies that employees that are geographically scattered is saying, hey, what did everyone have for dinner last night? Or, did anyone do something interesting this weekend? Getting the conversation flowing in that way can be a really good way to understand, oh, hey, what did you do? Or I connect with you on this level that is a little bit more than just work. And actually the studies show that when you connect on that personal level with your employees, wherever they are, or with your team, wherever they are, your work productivity increases because now you're invested in a way that you weren't before. So I think, just being able to have those conversations kind of light at the beginning before you get into the nitty gritty of things can be a way to unite people in certain ways.
I think something else that I often hear businesses say is sometimes they'll say to me, oh, we haven't quite got time for this, fluffy stuff. I don't know whether that's a term in the US as well, but like the soft skills, the people bit sometimes gets referred to as fluffy stuff. They'll say we need to be, keep being task orientated and get on the business, get on the job, get on the task that needs to be done. And sometimes, when you are able to step back and think about, what Hannah suggested and thinking about how we're going to get to know people better, it has been even more important in the last year than ever. But often it saves so much time in the long run, because busy people say, I haven't got time for this. We need to just get on with the task. And actually being able to take a little bit of time out and step back, because my challenge will always be there to say to businesses, well, that's fine if you're not going to get to know people, how they are, who they are, what makes them tick. When it all goes horribly wrong, how much time do you then spend putting it all back together again and sorting out? And that's usually where people sort of go, oh, okay, you're right. So actually what I call upstream, creating some sort of energy about getting to know people in a different way than just around how they're going to do the job, or what are they going to do to get the job done. And that is invaluable, getting to know. And that's often why people like Hannah and I are probably brought into businesses to encourage that kind of conversation about how we are, who we are first, and then how are we going to communicate to each other. Gives usually some real gems at the end.
I like that, Alison. I know as a team at Dyke Yaxley, when this started and we were thrown into this situation sort of suddenly, we started doing quizzes so that once a month, so that we all came together for something fun. But the very first one we did was get to know each other. And we had people submit some true things and some things that weren't true. And we had people, answer the questions the best they could. And it made us laugh, and I think it connected us as a team really well, being that we were on both sides of the pond. So I'm just add that in as one of my personal experiences from working with our firm. That was really great.
I love that. And just to add on, it sounds like you really integrated that in your day-to-day too. And I think where leaders tend to have roadblocks in this is when they play catch up. They wait too long to introduce kind of that personal feel. So, it will be a couple months that go by and you say, here's a virtual yoga class. I'm going to throw that out there for you, which is great. And the intention is wonderful. But then employees kind of think, what, where was that all along? Or, I feel like I'm playing catch up here. And having just, instead of that hour-long virtual yoga class, having 2 minutes at the beginning of each team meeting or weekly check-in to say, you know, like, what's your, if you could eat any cheese for the rest of your life, that was one that I heard from the team, which cheese would it be? And it's just kind of goofy, and it takes 2 minutes, and everyone goes around and it's mozzarella or whatever it is. And having that investment of 2 minutes in your weekly team meeting versus having, you know, later to play catch up and have to kind of show all of these ways that you're investing in your employees, that ends up taking more time, and people kind of see through that, unfortunately, even if it is coming from a genuine place.
I definitely agree with that. I think not having it just seen as a tick box is really critical, because if employees get the sense that something's just, oh, they've just done that to sort of tick that box, they get very suspicious of that and very uncomfortable with it. And I think things like everything goes down for me around things for keeping people motivated and encouraged and switched on, really, is everything happening in the moment when it needs to be. You know, feedback is a classic example, giving praise. And often we wait till it's the big developmental check-in, and actually, what about all the time? And I feel like all these things need to be created in that space of when it's appropriate in the moment. And I think that's what the challenge of this last year has been, because we haven't all been in offices. You know, I've literally been sat here on Zoom since March last year. Haven't worked with a person for still today, and you know, it takes its toll for all sorts of different reasons.
So I think, as we sort of mentioned, I think when this all first came to be sort of 16, 18 months ago now, is obviously we were doing the things like the quizzes and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, this has gone a lot longer than anticipated to start with, but in reality, the sort of hybrid working environment, I think, is here to stay on a permanent basis in some form or another. So I think is perhaps, and I know we're going to talk about this, you've got some ideas, Alison and Hannah, that you can sort of share with the group of things that you think might help us as business leaders to sort of adapt permanently to the new way of working. Because I don't think, certainly in our group, I don't have any inclination to have everybody back in the office 100% of the time. And as long as everybody's happy and they're being productive and clients are being served, we've basically within our group sort of said is, you can, if you want to work at home 5 days a week, you can work at home 5 days a week. If you want to come in, as long as we can do it safely within the restrictions, you can come in, or anything in between. So what sort of things are you seeing, or are you suggesting to clients as with respect to this, that everybody on the thing can maybe take something away to start thinking about, to try and implement and keep everybody on the workforce happier? And obviously, I think all of us want to make sure that when we've got great employees, they stay with us, and we don't want to let them go to somewhere else. So what can we do to keep the workforce, our team, in place?
I think the first thing that springs to my mind, and I have hinted at it already, is to respect the fact that we are all different. And I think that it sounds so, again, I always think the gems are the most simple things. We forget that people will have a different response. You might have the greatest idea about how you want your business to move forward and come out of this current situation, but actually the plan often doesn't work once you wheel the people in, because people will have differences. So I'm hearing Rob saying he's going to be able to say to his teams, right, you choose, and that's amazing for people to be able to choose. But I guess that isn't going to be the case for everybody. I know there's lots of firms who are saying we need everyone back in. And I think that's going to be really interesting to manage, because there is all those individuals who need different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would just add, you know, Rob, part of what you said was actually what I think is part of the answer. And you said, you know, how do you communicate to employees that you are valued, that, you know, we want you here? And saying simply that, first and foremost, to your employees can make all of the difference. Recognition in itself is a huge driving factor for employees to stay with their company. So simply saying, getting everyone on a call and being like, I know that we are pivoting. I know that this is uncertain times, and we're kind of figuring out a way to make a hybrid workplace. I just want you all to know that I really value you, and I want you here. And just hearing that, that slight bit of vulnerability from a leader can mean a lot to an employee. So that's the first thing I would say. The second is realizing that there is no blueprint for this. So cutting yourself a little bit of slack in this way. There's no website that will tell you exactly how to be, considering everything is different and the times are changing. Things are opening up in different ways and in different areas. So understanding there is no blueprint. So having that, but also knowing that in order to form your plan for getting back to normal, you cannot do that without check-ins with your employees. So maybe trying to establish certain things that you can do for your employees first and foremost, but also being able to get your team on a schedule of team check-ins and individual check-ins that don't feel overwhelming, so that while you're considering whether it's a hybrid workplace or in person or completely remote, you are taking the advice from your employees every step of the way, maybe not the advice, but the input. And that, again, just them feeling valued in that way as, hey, I'm part of the solution, I'm part of the plan, will be a driving force in having them stay with you and feel productive and be productive.
Yeah, brilliant, Hannah. I think something that is very simple, again, that just springs to my mind is asking people what's working for them and then what's not working for them, and be able to just use that live almost data, and not be afraid to ask. I think, again, there's this sort of bridge that needs to be built sometimes when we have had something quite difficult to manage around asking people what's going on for them. And there's always, I often hear leaders say, well, I don't want to pry on their personal things. I need to be mindful of how they're dealing with things, but actually you do have a responsibility to look after their welfare. Although, as I said at the beginning, not all the responsibility is down to businesses and leaders. And I think that's a huge important balance, because I remember I coached somebody recently and she said she has literally felt like she's carried the responsibility of keeping everybody's jobs going for the last 15 months, and she's literally on her knees. And when she realized what she'd been doing, and actually how we can then help everybody else take their bit of responsibility, asking or encouraging people to speak up. The amount of times I've had clients where through the coaching they've been able to actually go and say what they need, simple again, it's changed everything, because the leaders have gone, oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, of course, that's a great idea. And being open to those ideas and that flexibility, I think, again, is going to keep people safe.
We've had a great comment in the chat about this is really great that many of us can have a setting where we can work from home and or in office. I know in our firm, because we travel, we were set up to work remotely to begin with. So that was part of the challenge that we had part of the challenge already met. But what about when people do have to be in the office or be at their location of work because it's the only way that they can accomplish their job? Now there's the extra pressure of making people feel safe, comfortable, because we are in a position where, it's a pandemic. So it's not beyond, you don't like the commute or you have the ability to work from home a few days a week. It is now also that extra challenge of we have to make sure everyone feels safe at the same time while they are trying to get their work done. Another interesting challenge.
Yeah, that's the huge thing. And that especially was really prevalent, at the beginning of COVID. I work with a lot of healthcare facilities, and they don't have the option of doing the team virtual quizzes, the caregivers there. They had to be in person and continue to have to be in person in that way. So I think we're at a really unique time. Someone mentioned at the beginning when we were asking how this past year has been as creative. Creative was a word that came, I think, a couple of times. And this opportunity for, if you have to be in the office right now, which many of us are starting to again, rethinking what that office space looks like. Can you kind of veer away from the traditional space? Can you crowdsource your employees to see what space feels good to them, feels safe to them, feels like a place that they can do work but also be happy? Crowdsourcing that, and then understanding that you can implement some of those things, some of the buying things that will help, that is important, but really getting that intel from your staff first and foremost, and saying, hey, I understand that we have to be in the office and there are certain things that we might have to steer away from because of, guidelines, which are ever changing. But I want to hear from you what you need in this physical space. And some might say, actually, I don't really like the coffee. Can you change the coffee, or maybe donuts every Friday, and things like this. Again, these simple things that don't cost a lot of time or money, but show your employees that you're thinking of them, is a great way to start.
Yeah, I definitely agree with asking. I think it is going to be very difficult. There's no doubt about it, because you've got some people who are absolutely desperate to get back to normal and literally want to just do it all. And then you've got the other people at the other end of the spectrum who literally are absolutely terrified still and don't want to come. And then you've got loads of people in the middle. So I think it is going to be a difficult time. But interestingly, just to share something that came up for me with the client last week, she had a challenge with differences of opinions around the vaccine. And she felt that she had people who were a bit anti-vaccine, and they were almost winding everyone else up in the office and saying, hey, I found this document and I found this piece of research and I have this and I have that. And then you've got others who were very much for it. And then you've got people in the middle who were getting quite anxious and quite concerned. And as a result of the coaching and her sharing it with me, she decided that one of her strategies was she was going to put a sort of an old-fashioned memo out to everyone to say, we need to respect each other's differences, and to not get involved in great big debates and trying to find a new bit of research that contradicts the thing that they were looking at yesterday. And she decided that she felt that was a comfortable place to just say, let's not talk about it in work. You can have your view, but let's be really clear on, we're not having conversations. We're not going to be sending documents round on the WhatsApp group for the teams, because it was causing a lot of anxiety. And I thought that was, she came up with that solution. And I thought that actually sounded quite sensible, just to say, let's agree that we're going to be different, but let's not wind each other up about it, because it was causing a lot of problems in the team.
That is a really good point, Alison. I share in the HR function in our firm because we have US and UK teams. And one of the things too, I was thinking through all of this is that I know I personally have had to listen to how some people feel, even though it doesn't necessarily agree with maybe how I feel or how I see things, but giving them that voice to at least express, but then be able to provide the challenging part, provide a strategy or provide something to help them. Not so much the anti-vaccine discussion, but in other ways, and that's proven to be a challenge as well. One of the things, and I think Rob, it'd be great for you also to think about this and weigh in on this. We've had another great comment about a concern about creating a two-tier workforce moving forward. So there's those of us who can choose to work from home because we're set up, our office is set up, we can service our clients, but yet have access to space. But then there's some who only have the employer provided formal workspace. So is there any thoughts about how to, this seems like a future challenge that could come out of all of this. Sorry to put you all on the spot, but any thoughts on that? On that comment?
I'll just comment from a personal perspective is, I think the challenge from maybe a manager or leader is that still, I think if I've got 2 employees and one was in the office and they were able to do what they wanted, so they worked from home if they wanted to, or came into the office if they want to, it's likely that if the two employees were doing really well, the one in the office potentially, in my mind, would maybe be seen to be doing better, just because you would see them on a daily basis and you kept being reminded that, yeah, they did this job really good. They asked me a great question. So I think from my perspective, the challenge is going to be with having people having that flexibility to make sure that you still assess everybody, try and keep an unbiased opinion when you're assessing them. And I think that's going to be a challenge. And I don't know how to get around that at the moment, but I know it's an issue there. But that's my own personal view on that.
It's a very interesting, I lost my word, but reflection on what is something that could be coming as a secondary challenge to what we've already been facing.
I think something for me, it's always going to be the balance between running the business and it being a success alongside keeping the staff and teams together and coherent and everything else. And I think that's always been the challenge, but I think it's just tenfolded itself. And I think being able to give people some level of choice actually does put people in a better part of their mind anyway, if they feel like they've had a decision that they've made. There's a lot of neuroscience out there about being able to give people a chance to feel like they've made a choice within boundaries of the business. And I think that it gets people on side, it gets them in their much more productive part of the mind if they're able to do that. So I think there's a skill for leaders to, I'm not going to say the illusion of choice because that sounds unfair, but actually just to be able to give people choices within a reasonable boundary, because at the end of the day, they've got a job to do and you've got a business to run. So I think it's always that critical balance that takes its time.
It's another interesting suggestion, and I think could be a really good strategy. Even so, I'll speak personally again about our firm. Yes, we're on two sides of the Atlantic, but also within our teams, within our countries, some of us are a couple of hours apart, or we're not all in the exact same location. But the suggestion of as things open up, maybe the office isn't available because of restrictions, but maybe a local coffee shop with Wi-Fi is available and 2 or 3 people could go and work together for a few hours or something and collaborate. I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah. What do you think, Alison, Hannah?
I think anything creative. I think we need to think about how we create the new norm. This could bring up new opportunities for all of us. And I think, how do we do that? Let's try and move away from now. This has all happened to us, and let's think, how are we going to create that? And I think somebody said it's given them an opportunity to be creative and adaptive. I think they were 2 words that you said, Christy, and I think let's try and max that out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, just now my internet actually went out and I was kicked off of the Zoom call, which brings me to a point which I think is really important is, how do you meet your employees where they are and create a space that feels right for them where they are? So, for example, if your employee is working from home or is not working in the traditional setting, can you maybe reallocate some funds to invest in good Wi-Fi for that employee, or invest in a printer or something that makes them feel like that physical space that they're rethinking feels like the workspace for them? What investment can you make in your employees in that way, whether that is in the office space, in the remote space, in a coffee shop? Maybe it's $20 for teams to meet up in different places to grab a cup of coffee with a shop that has good Wi-Fi, as Christy was saying. So understanding where your individual employees are and maybe how you can meet them it doesn't have to cost a lot, in minimal ways. I think that's important. I also believe that in addition to kind of meeting people in this way, you have to really kind of like Alison was saying, get creative for what the whole team looks like. Are there certain meetups that can happen? Are there certain, monthly check-ins that can happen for a whole team to make sure that you're also getting that community feel in addition to the one-on-one stuff?
No, that's great. We haven't gotten many really direct questions. We've had these wonderful comments come into the chat, which have been great. One to kind of segue into the last several minutes of our discussion, I received a comment from an attendee that I like these words. He ended it with saying, well, thinking of the future, we'll need to be aware, compassionate, which is not something we always hear in business, right? We think of that more on a personal level, astute, and flexible as time goes on. So I'd love to segue now into kind of wrapping up our discussion with Alison and Hanna with what we talked about all kinds of things. What are some takeaways? What are some strategies that we can all take away from this as we continue to go down this road, whether or not we're in an area now that very few restrictions, or whether there are restrictions, and what the future workforce looks like?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, one, as I mentioned before, is to realize that there is no blueprint for this. So cutting yourself some slack in that way to make sure that you are realizing that. But also understanding that you are not alone. There are other leaders who are facing similar challenges, who are grappling with these kind of larger questions. So how can you pull resources from the community while also staying true to yourself and your individual team? So perhaps investing in outside help that might be able to get you off the ground to create some kind of plan, making that investment for your team, for your employees, but also checking in with other leaders, like-minded leaders in the space. Maybe it's a WhatsApp group, maybe it's a Facebook group, whatever it is, and just saying, hey, these things came up with my employees. I'm wondering if you're seeing this and what kind of steps you're taking to address them. So getting 5 people who are in the space, who are leaders, who have a similar position, and just creating your own little community to reassess, but also understanding that as we change, there are resources out there to help us change as well. But the first step in that is understanding that you need the awareness, you need to observe what's going on, and then kind of create the change, and honoring that observation while also thinking about the future it's a winning combination.
Yeah, I think just to echo what Hannah's just said there, I think the strapline needs to be, it's okay not to be okay. To have moments in your day or in your week where you're not okay. And even if you are the leader right at the very top, it can feel very lonely up there when you are not feeling okay. So I think just being kinder to ourselves, all of us, I think we need to come out of this, somehow intact. And it's just checking in with what that might be. So I think a strategy that I think is really useful that for us all on this call, but also for you to encourage your teams to think about if you are leading, is to think about, what am I doing too much of that's not okay? So am I still answering phone calls at 10 o'clock at night, or am I still responding to emails? So what am I doing too much of? And what am I not doing enough of? And usually those things are the things that actually keep you in flow. They're the things that you really do love. And I think we're in a great place, weren't we? People, it's certainly in the UK, used to talk about everyone went out for a walk in the evenings after their dinners, and it was so healthy and so lovely. And then I can see people have stopped doing that, and they've fallen back into that kind of routine of it being full on. So I think being able to identify what keeps you in flow, each of us and individuals, and seeing if we can keep asking ourselves that question, what am I doing too much of? And what am I not doing enough of? And whatever that is, it fits for the individual responses, it fits with the team, or you could ask yourselves as a team, what are we not doing enough of, and what are we doing too much of? Again, it really helps you all start to keep that awareness, keep the day-to-day in sight, because we can so easily get back into bad habits. And for me, right at the beginning, I remember asking people, what's your one thing you're going to be doing differently? And then now the challenge is, how are you keeping that going? And I can tell that people are stopping doing some of the things that keep them in flow. So I think that's just got to be something we've got to constantly ask yourself, whether you feel like you're having a great week or even feel like you're really having a not such good week. What am I doing? You can usually very quickly go, oh, there it is. And it can just shift you straight away.
Yeah, and that's really playing on the theme of accountability. I mean, essentially, is how are you going to hold yourself accountable for those check-ins? Is it every week that you're going to be asking yourself those questions? And how will you hold each other accountable as a group as well? Let's check in together. Let's make sure that we make this a priority, whether it's your team, or it's, the group of CEOs that you are part of, or it's, a group of friends, whatever it is how do we set up that accountability so we are continually, like Alison said, asking those questions.
Rob, we'd love to hear from you as the business leader, what your thoughts are as we move forward.
I think it's just it is a challenge, but I think as Alison and Hannah have alluded to, it's because it is the unknown. There isn't somewhere you can go to. So I think anybody who's on this call who we have the privilege of working with will know is quite often in recent calls, one of the questions I put out there, because I'm trying to find out answers, is asking them what they've been finding has been working with their employees. So what they've been doing. So I think it's all of us is just trying to learn off each other as we go through, because there isn't a book you can go to. The news can change, and all of a sudden, when in the UK at the moment, because I haven't been to the States for 18 months, is you get the news in the morning and you find a couple of weeks ago, Portugal all of a sudden went off the green list onto the amber list. And that just caused a lot of consternations, because people were thinking, at least I can go to Portugal for my holiday and go and come back and life's pretty much in normal, but you can't do that now. So it's just those little things that have an impact on that. I know there's people here in the office that every time there's maybe the lifting of the flights, or there's a chance of having a flight, that person's mental well-being, mental health smile on their face goes from corner to corner, because they think they're going off on a holiday. And then as soon as the government changes it, then in a sense it pulls it all back again. So I think from where I'm sitting, that's the challenge, is one, managing it for yourself, and two, just manage it for other people, because it is still changing quite a lot at the moment. Another 6 months down the road, there might be a lot more stuff in place that's more static again. So it's just the unknown at the moment. It's a challenge to manage from in a sense, employer's perspective, I think.
Definitely. And I think, Rob, just to come back to add to that, there isn't a manual, as we've said, for coming out of this. There wasn't a manual going in, and there isn't a manual coming out. And there also isn't a manual really for how your mind works and how we are responding and how we are. And I think finding ways to manage some of those responses, or noticing the responses, but not acting on the responses that we have of the mind, whether we feel like angry and we're so furious with the situation, or we feel like hiding under our duvet and not wanting to come out, or we just don't know what to do. I think as soon as you notice you're in any of those, that's very, the limbic system's kicked in. We're getting a very fight, flight, or freeze response. And if we act on that response, we'll often not do what we want to do. And I think that comes down to that being kinder to yourself, but actually just being able to notice that you are fuming, but not act on it. I think that's the skill.
Really great points. And I will just state, as on the US side of the pond for Dyke, Yaxley, USA, we're anxious for Rob to come back for a visit. So we're hoping that this, with these green lists and these travel corridors, can be opened up at some point soon. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you, Hannah and Alison, for your insights. Thank you, Rob, for coming in and sharing as a business leader. We hope that everyone has something to take away. We know I'm going to turn it over now to Grace, because I'm about to steal her thunder with what I'm about to say. So thank you again. And Grace, we'll let you.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Yes, just a reminder to be kind to yourself and kind to each other, really. I'll follow up with an email and a recording to the YouTube channel, so you can all watch it back and share it with colleagues if you want to. And just thank you so much for all of your time. It was a really great session. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Everyone. Bye.